Hi friends, welcome to episode number 29 of our procurement and sourcing series. In this episode, we will discuss in detail about royalty contract management capabilities in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. Make sure that you watch the videos related to vendor rebate agreement part 1 and part 2 and broker contract management capabilities before getting into this episode because the configurations which we are going to see as part of this video are very similar to those. So with that note, let's quickly jump into today's topic. So let's quickly get into today's topic of royalty contract management. First, let's try to understand about the basic fundamental definition for royalty contract management in Dynamics 365. Royalty contract management is intended for companies that exercise the right to use third parties asset. So this third party need to be assigned created as a vendor in our system and or intellectual properties. So for manufacturing a specific good in your organization, if you're using any third party intellectual property or any third party asset, let's say you use a third party vendor machine in order to manufacture a specific finished good, in those cases you are liable to pay the royalty charges, royalty fee to the third party vendor or the supplier. So it helps companies better manage their royalty agreements by automating tasks that are involved in administrating, tracking, and making royalty payments. So how do we create these royalty agreements in the system? And then when these royalty claims need to be approved and processed, and how the settlement happens to the respective vendors who are created in the system. So that's what we are going to see in this video. But if you are coming to this video directly, I will strongly recommend you to check out the videos which we have already published as part of this procurement and sourcing series related to vendor rebate part 1 and part 2 and broker contract management, which is the previous episode number 28, because this rebate royalty contract management is very similar to the configuration, or I would say the configuration is same in terms of how do we generate the claims and process the royalties to the respective vendors. So which is very similar to what we have done in case of vendor rebate agreement or broker contract management. So please check out the same. So some of the configurations related to royalty I'll be going bit fast. So if you have already watched that video, then it absolutely makes sense to continue this particular one. So the royalty to vendor is something which when an organization uses a specific third-party asset or an intellectual property from a third-party agent, using which if they manufacture any finished good or trade any finished good, then in those cases the organization, in this case it may be USMF, is liable to pay a royalty to the vendor. So whomever who actually owns the licensor of of that intellectual property need to be created as a vendor in the system. That is important. So this is a similar process flow to what we have seen in case of broker contract management. So it starts off with creating the licensor as a vendor in the system, and you need to create the item for which the royalty is applicable in the item master. We are not going to discuss about the creation of vendor and the item in this video, but we will start off with parameterizing the journals. So let me get into Dynamics 365 screen. So in case of royalty, you need to go to accounts payable. I'll collapse all. There is a section called broker and royalties, and there is a section called royalty agreements. But before we configure the royalty agreements, first we need to parameterize the journals. Let's go to setup, accounts payable parameters. So this setup is very similar to the vendor rebate agreement setup which we have done in procurement and sourcing parameters. So in accounts payable, there is a section called royalties. So here the configuration is exactly the same how we want to accrue the interim expense account in a specific using by posting a specific journal, and we need to configure the accrual account and the expense account. So these are the two accounts which will act as an interim account when we actually approve and accumulate the expenses and process the claims. And once the claims are settled, the whatever the royalty value will move from the expense account to the respective vendor account. So that's what the process will be. So in this case, the accounts which are tagged is for accrual, there is already default account is tagged, and for expense also a default account is tagged. We will quickly see as we progress in this video how where these accounts reflect in our ledger. And you can also create a journal name. So in this case, already there is a journal which is created. Using this journal, the accrual process will happen. Let's say throughout the year, you start selling the item for which you need to process a royalty. So throughout the year, the royalty will gets accrued using this particular journal name. And then at the end of the year, you will settle that particular royalty, or maybe quarterly or offerly, depending upon your business requirements. Then once you settle the claims, the whatever the amount which is accrued by using this journal will be debited from this expense account and then credited into the vendor invoice account. So we will also see once the vendor invoice is generated. So the whole idea is, end of the day, once the royalty claims are settled, the vendor invoice need to be generated and the balance should reflect in the vendor account. So this is the first parameter which we need to configure, which is a journal name and then accrual account and expense account. Let me save this and go back to slide. And the next thing is you need to register the negotiated royalty contract. So you have the negotiated contract with the royalty vendors. So you need to configure the royalty contract into the system. How to do that? If you go to accounts payable module and the brokers and royalties, there is a section called royalty agreements. So similar to vendor rebate agreements, you need to configure the royalty agreements over here. So using these royalty agreements, you will be defining what are all the negotiated terms and conditions. So let me click on new. So if you have seen the vendor rebate agreement already, then which we have discussed in detail in the vendor rebate agreement part 2, I will also share the code for that particular video so that you can check out the same. So in this case, let's say who is the vendor? Let's say Landy Packaging Supplies is the vendor who is eligible for a royalty claim. Then Landy Packaging royalty. Just give a short description. Unit is eachers. It can be inventory unit or a catch weight unit, depends upon the unit with which you operate. And do you want to convert the unit or keep it as an exact match? Whenever you want it to be the exact match with the unit which you have configured with the unit in the sales order line, then you need to put an exact match. Or if you want to convert it, then you need to keep it as convert. Let me keep it as convert. And then it will take the unit conversion and convert the appropriate units accordingly. And then the calculation date type. So what is the calculation date type? Similar to rebate agreement, here also you need to define which particular date need to be considered, whether the requested receipt date or the created date in the sales order, or the requested ship date, which need to be considered for processing these, or sorry, generating the claims. Not for processing the claims, first we generate the claims and then only we approve it and process it. So for generating the claims, which particular date need to be considered. And then you can also provide a start date and end date depending on which particular period this particular royalty is eligible. Let's say this royalty is eligible for this 1 week period. And then all these configurations we have already discussed in the rebate agreement episode. So how do you want to accumulate? It should be based on the invoice. Then whenever we post the invoice, these royalty claims will be generated. Let me keep it as invoice, and it applies on the gross amount, not on the net amount. Net amount will be after factoring all your discounts. That will be the net amount. And the accrual account and the expense account by default comes from the parameter which we have configured in the accounts payable parameter. Currency is set up. And if I enable approval, then whenever the claims are accumulated, so there is a process of accumulation, approval, and then processes. So accumulation is when all the royalty claims across the respective vendor account will be accumulated. And then after accumulation, do you want to be approved and then processed? Then in those cases, you need to enable this particular toggle. We will quickly see that as part of this video. And then you want to calculate the royalty based on the total quantity of the sales order line or the total amount. Let's say if I want to keep it as total amount, then let me save this. And the most important thing is we need to add the line for which particular line item. So for example, here we have provided the vendor account and then percentage amount. So the selection, in the selection section, we need to go and add the item numbers. Let's say for a specific item, let's say I want to configure for a sound bar, or let me go for standard big speaker maybe. Let me add the item, then click on OK. So the item is added. You can do this configuration at the site and warehouse level also. Let me put a site 1 warehouse level, then save this. and then you need to configure the royalty amount. What is the royalty amount which the vendor Landy packaging is eligible? Let's say assume we are using a specific package for which the intellectual property rights are owned by the Landy packaging company. So whenever we use a specific kind of a special kind of packaging for the item which we have selected, the standard speaker, then we are supposed to pay a royalty for Landy packaging supplies. So let's say for 1 to 100 quantity, the eligible value is 2, and for um, and for 101 to maybe 500, the eligible value is 4. And always make sure the 2 value is excluded. So let me give us 101. So that from 1 to 100 the value is 2, royalty applicable is $2, and from 101 to 499 the royalty value applicable is $4. So let me close this and save again. So this is how you need to configure the royalty agreement, which is the next important setup. Once you have configured the royalty agreement, make sure that you need to validate it. Only if it is not validated, then that will not be used as part of your royalty claim generation. So once it is validated, this toggle is automatically enabled so that it shows that the royalty agreement is in active state once it is validated. So now let's go back to the slide. So we have registered the negotiated royalty claim into the system using the royalty agreement. Now what we have to do is let's go and create a sales order. That's our next step. So once we process this standard speaker, let me select the item number. So whenever we generate the sales order for this speaker to the customer, then um, the vendor Landy packaging is eligible for a royalty claim. So let me go to new and click on customer account. Let me select a customer account. Then site and warehouse, create a sales order. So in this sales order, I'm going to add that standard speaker item number. And after adding the item number, let me give a quantity as 10 speakers. Then site 1, warehouse 11. Let me save this. Um, I think, okay, we have configured it as an amount. Let me duplicate the tab. I'll just duplicate the tab. So now let me go back to the accounts payable, because parallelly I want to show you how this royalty agreement configuration works. So if I go to royalty amounts, so this is based on the amount. So probably we might need to increase the value. Let's say the value is from 1000. So this is already validated. So that's why the system is not allowing me to modify the change, but that's fine. But the overall net amount is 3500. So I will try to reduce the quantity in that case. So because the value of one quantity is 350. So let me I made the quantity as one quantity 350, and the royalty agreement applicable should be $2. Okay, so we have one quantity now. Let me save this. So now to check the royalty value which is applicable, all you have to do is under sales order lines, you need to check the price details. Sometimes this price details will not be visible. Then in those cases, all you have to check is if you go to accounts receivables parameter, and you have to enable the enable price details option. So this is a configuration. So make sure that which is enabled always under prices, make sure that this enable price details is always enabled. If this is not enabled, then you will not be able to view the price detail section. So let me go back to sales order. Then so this is the sales order 861, and yeah, so for $350 the vendor is eligible for $2 claim. So in order to check the claim, go to view price details, and so here under the royalty section you can see that a royalty claim of $2 is value is 4, and starting royalty amount is 14 because let me go to royalty agreements, value is 2, uh, 1 2 sorry, I think I'm in the law. Yeah. uh, okay, it is $4, right? Actually, So for the Landy packing supplies, vendor account 1002 for, so we have given a value of, what is the value we have given? Which is 350. Okay, value is 350. So that makes sense. So the value is 350, which comes in the from value to value range of 350, 101 to 500. So the value of $4 is taken. So let me open the sales order line. Then price details. So value is $4, and the starting royalty amount is $14. This is because if I let me go and change the quantity, then you will be able to understand. If I going back to our royalty agreement configuration, in case of Landy packaging supplies, so actually the value, it is based on the amount, and the value is a bit lower because the cost of the speakers are on the higher end. So here on the line section also, if you see the amount type, what the method which you have taken is percentage. So in this case, for 4 quantity, the total net amount is coming to $1,400. Let me reduce this unit price as 100. So we need to understand the logic of how this royalty claim is generated. So I'm just primarily reducing the unit price. So the total net amount is $400, which means $400. Then in this case, it comes under the bracket of 101 to 500, which means 4% of $400, which is $16. So if I go to sales order line, then click on price details. So you can see the starting royalty amount is $16. The value which is actually eligible is 4%. So 4% of $400 is $16. So let's say, let's go back and change the quantity to 3 because we have modified the unit price. Click on OK. Let me keep it as 100. So the net amount is 300. So which still comes under the bracket of 101 to 500. So 4% is eligible. So 4% of $300, which is $12, is the royalty claim which need to be settled to Landay Packaging Supplies. So $12 should be the value. You see, so the value is $12. So 4% is the value which is taken, and the royalty eligible for this particular sales order line is created. So let me go back to the slide. So we created the sales order, and we are able to check and confirm the royalty claims in the sales order line. But you need to make sure that you enable the view price details option in the accounts payable parameters. Accounts receivable parameters, which is very important, which I showed it to you right now. This is an important setup. Do not miss this one, because accounts receivable parameter, you need to make sure that this is enabled. So let me go back to the sales orders. So in the sales order, now we need to post the invoice. Only when we post this invoice, the claim gets generated for the royalties. So I'm not getting into posting the packing slip and picking list, but I'm not sure whether the stock is available for this item. Let me check whether the stock is available for this item. If not, I will add the stock. So we have the stock for this item. So let me quickly reserve this, reserve lot. Let me go back, then let me invoice this. So I'm going to invoice this item. So I'm not posting the packing slip, I'm directly invoicing this item. So once the invoice is generated, then we will quickly check in the transactions also how this royalty is generated. And so the invoice is posted. You can see the status of the sales order is invoiced. So now if I go to the inventory and click on transactions, so if I go to the voucher, physical voucher, so now you can see the accounts receivable for the respective goods is $321, but still the sales order revenue got posted, and you can also see the tax is posted and finished good. But at the same time, a claim is generated, but which is not shown here, because the royalty is something which is actually shown under the royalty claims. Let me go to accounts receivable, accounts payable, collapse all, brokers and royalties, and royalty claims. So here we will be able to see the claim will be generated. Great. So the claim is generated for the vendor account 1002, which is Landy Office Supplies, Landy Packaging Supplies, for the standard speaker D0023. So now it is in the status of calculated. So let me go to, because we have already selected the type as invoice. So when we actually invoiced it, it got calculated. So if let me go and approve this. So the vendor account is 1002. So you can include further more records by using the filter option. Let me click on OK. So this will approve the royalty claim which generated. So now you can see the royalty claim is approved, which means if I go to royalty transactions, you can see there is a accrual journal which got created. So now whatever the expenses which are posted from the initial part of the video, if you remember, we already given expense account and accrual account. So if I go to this accrual journal and then lines, we will be able to view the same account numbers, where 200 was the account number which we have configured in the accounts payable parameter. And also if you see here, the offset accounts is 606,800. Let me show you again if you have forgot that. Setup accounts payable parameter, broker and royalty. So if you can see, this is the accrual account which we consider 200. So from which the accrual has happened, and expense account is 606,800. So this is the expense account. So now, since we have approved this is considered as an expense and it is posted in an interim account. Now it need to be debited from this interim account and posted into the vendor account. So how to do that? That happens only when we process these royalty claims. So let me go back. So now here also, let me click on that once again. Here also you can see the invoice journal is not yet created, but let me go back and then process this claim. Vendor account is 002. Click on OK. So this will process the claim. Once it processes the royalty claim, then it gets debited from the interim expense account and credited into the vendor account, and the vendor invoice journal is created. So that's the whole process. So you can see the status is completed. Sorry, this is the second line. The status is completed. So now if I go to royalties transactions, we can see 3 lines where one, there is a debit which happens from your expense account and credit which happens in your vendor account. So once you click on the vendor invoice, you can see the invoice journal. So I'll click on the invoice journal and click on lines. So from here, you can see the value of amount is $12. And then, so this is the invoice amount, which is reflecting over here. And if you go to voucher, so I think this is not, the voucher is not generated here, but I think if you go to vendor invoice, let me go to invoice, open vendor invoices, and let me filter the vendor account 1002. I think here we will be able to view the invoice. Let me click on the invoice. Yes, we can view it from here, the original invoice which gets generated. So this one you can send it to the vendor in order to confirm them the vendor balance adjustments. And this is a payable for us. That's why it is actually reflecting as part of our accounts payable module. So so as an organization from USMF legal entity, we are liable to pay $12 for selling the standard speakers to Condoso retail, and it goes as a royalty claim settlement to vendor Lanty Packing Supplies. So sometimes this invoice generation takes time, but let me go back to the presentation. So this is what overall whatever I have written is the accrual and expense account fields must specify the account numbers that will receive accrued amounts. So what are the accrued amounts when we approve the claims? These are the accrued amounts which will be posted against the accrual account and the expense account. And this is basically an interim stage between the approval and processing. Once we process this, all this interim postings from the accrual and expense account will be credited into your vendor balance. And this is generally done by your account payable clerk or an agent who is actually doing all these claim settlements. A royalty accrual journal posting reverses the previous interim amount. So that's what we saw. So it reverses, there is a negative transaction from the expense account, and then a vendor invoice for the royalty amount is created. So let's go back to the screen. So you can see the vendor invoice for the $12 got generated. And as a result, the vendor payable account is created and the royalty fees account is debited. So this is the whole process of this is very similar to the process of what we have seen in case of vendor rebate agreement, broker contract management, and royalty management. So please do check out those videos also. So the process remains the same. So in the next episode, we will be discussing in detail about Copilot in procurement, and that's going to be an interesting video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel D365 Talks or follow my profile in LinkedIn. Thank you.